Let's go to Christchurch now. On the 22nd of next month, it will be 5 years to the day since 185 people died and thousands, tens of thousands of properties were damaged in a 6.3 magnitude earthquake. We all remember it. EQC's website states that of 167,000 properties with a building claim, 2% remain unresolved. Is that a lot or a little 5 years on? Well, today the leader of the opposition, Andrew Little, went to meet some of those people. We will talk to him later. But politics aside, we begin tonight with one family still waiting for a new home. We'll join them in their temporary home in exactly a minute. But first, a very short background on Loretta and Nick Te Paa.
Day-to-day living, year by year, week by week.
Perhaps few families in Christchurch have been quite as exposed or as vulnerable as the Te Paa family. Their house in Woolston was on land that effectively became swamp. A dispute with Southern Response, that's the Crown entity charged with settling AMI's earthquake claims, has seen the couple and their 2 children in small, temporary accommodation for over 4 years with no insulation and very little storage. All of this is compounded by Nick Te Paa's chronic illness, which has seen him receive 2 kidney transplants, contract type 1 diabetes, and then an incurable flesh-eating disease.
About 50 tablets a day.
Now, Loretta has been formally diagnosed with depression.
Living here, living with no storage and no space, watching people move out, come and go, and just not having a home.
We should say that Southern Response dispute the use of the word dispute. They say there was no dispute about the settlement, that it was simply protracted. A short time ago, I spoke to Loretta and Nick Te Paa from the family's temporary home in Linwood Park, and I asked them to describe the past 5 years.
Terrible, hard, depressing, not knowing when we're going to be going home, problems with Southern Response and not coming to the party, Peter Ray Holmes not coming to the party with the rebuild and not getting an end date. We started our rebuild back in 2013. The Southern Response drew our money down from the mortgage company saying we were ready to go to build, and we're now 2016, we're now on our 4th round of foundations, and we still don't have a house.
Sorry, Loretta, your 4th round of foundations. Can you explain that to me? How can you have 4 rounds of foundations?
We started off with a TC3 section, and we had a lot of liquefaction, a lot of flooding. We were fully flooded with the February earthquake, as well as the June earthquake came through, and it ruined the section even further. We have got a stormwater easement which belongs to the City Council in the backyard, which ruptured. And we had the water from the creek, which is only probably about 7 metres away from us, which came over as well. And so what they did is they came in and they declared the section as being TC3. They were going to put down what they call a riprap foundation, which is they prepare the ground and build the ground up, put a riprap foundation down, did that to discover that we had, that they had found peat in the section.
So wait a sec. All of this work was done, and then after that work and after that money, the discovery of peat was made?
Yes.
Okay.
But the peat in the section was actually already there. That was found when they did the original DRA after the February earthquake.
How many times have you gone to Southern Response and said, what's going on? When are we getting our home?
We go to Southern Response just about every day since the February earthquakes happened. We've been in contact with them. I've lost count on how many times we've gone there.
And how many case managers have you had? Do you get to deal with the same person over and over, or do you constantly deal with different people?
No, constantly different people. We started off with a lovely guy from Southern Response, and that was David Fawcett, and he promised us that we were going to be built back in 2013. We will be the first house built under vulnerability. That didn't happen, and then we got put on to a lovely lady called Tina McCarthy. We had her for a while. Everything was going nice and smoothly. and then we lost her.
Okay, now hold on, I want to
Just
come in
seems
there.
everything's going sort of...
Nick, can I come in there? Because the vulnerability is yours, right? So in 2013, you were told you were going to be built within a year under vulnerability, and that's now 3 years ago, because, Nick, you are really crook, aren't you?
Yes, and yeah, basically, it's like Groundhog Day. Every day, the same thing sort of happens. It goes around, and you think you're getting somewhere, then it starts again, and it's just the same thing over and over and over.
So Southern Response, Nick, understood the nature of your illness. Can you describe it for us? What is wrong with you, in short?
So I've had 2 kidney transplants. I've got diabetes through the transplant. My stress levels are through the roof, and the stress causes blood pressure to go up, and blood pressure is not good for transplants and diabetics.
So you...
It actually...
So you were put on the vulnerability category in 2013 and promised a quick rebuild. And at the beginning of 2016, you are still waiting.
Still waiting, yes.
And what impact has that had on you?
Foundation. Well, the stress is just through the roof.
You've got post-traumatic stress now.
I've got post-traumatic stress. My wife, who is one of the strongest people that I know, especially when I was sick, she sort of never fluctuated. This has really rocked her. She's sort of at the end of her tether, I think.
Are you, Loretta?
Yeah, I've had enough of just the lies and the deceit and the delay time. I mean, we've got 2 young children that we look after of our own, and they just don't know when we're going to go home. I mean, they keep asking, when are we going to go home? Our 3-year-old's never been there. All he knows is the earthquake village in Linwood Park is where he is his home.
This is his house.
He doesn't know any different. I mean, he doesn't have any friends apart from the kids that he deals with at Paws.
Yeah. He makes a friend here, and then the next day he's gone.
I mean, we've got families that come in, they're here for 6 weeks, 26 weeks, start to finish for rebuilds, and we're still here.
How long have you been there for in that temporary housing that is not insulated and is clearly inadequate for your family from the footage we've seen of it?
We've just clicked over 4 years in October, just gone. Yeah. So my Christmas tree's still up. It's been up for the last 3 years.
And when you first went in there, how long did you think you would be there for?
26 weeks, we were told.
How long?
And we budgeted for 26 weeks.
26 weeks, which is 6.5 months, and you've been there for over 4 years. Nick and Loretta Te Paa, I was talking to them via Skype video. Now, we put in a call to Southern Response this morning. We received a statement from them this afternoon. It's quite a long statement, but I'm going to read it. The spokeswoman says, "We're committed to working with all of our customers to get them back into safe quality homes as quickly as possible. We sympathise with Mr and Mrs Te Paa's situation and have done our best to fully support them throughout their settlement process and take a flexible approach to their home design to best meet their needs. Mr and Mrs Te Paa's rebuild is on a heavily compromised site in a flood management area on TC3 land, requiring more complex design solutions than typical rebuilds and substantial ground remediation to meet consenting standards. And Mr and Mrs Te Paa's request, we also paused construction to redesign the foundation, which required a new consent. This has all contributed to a longer than anticipated time frame for getting the Te Paas back home. Framing work is now about to commence, and all involved with the build are doing everything they can to ensure that it is completed as quickly as possible. We continue to support the Te Paas with funds for their temporary accommodation and will do so until the build of their home is complete. As of December 2015, we have fully settled just under 70% of our customers over cap house claims, just under 70%. We'll speak to the family's lawyer, Grant Cameron, after 5:30. The question is, how representative is this sort of thing? Almost 5 years next month, since that February 22nd earthquake. Well, Grant Cameron, who was a lawyer who acts on behalf of many of these people and is representing people in a class action against Southern Response, I put this question to him. Is it a small amount of people now we're talking about?
We're looking at very large numbers still. I think Southern Response on its website would probably reveal about 2,700 unsettled claims.
2,700?
That's right. And I think in terms of the other insurers, we would expect similar numbers with IAG and probably similar numbers again with all the other insurers combined. So there are still an awful lot of households in Christchurch without claims being resolved.
Inevitably, after an event of this magnitude, there are going to be disputes, aren't there? There are simply going to be claimants and insurers who totally disagree about value and about the quality of the rebuild or whatever. How much of the unresolved business is about disputes that simply can't be settled?
I think very few of them can't be settled. In our observation, we think the evidence shows that the insurer is dragging the chain. It is not addressing matters in a professional manner. It is briefing a few experts, probably on the wrong basis in some cases, and is certainly ignoring expert evidence provided on behalf of insurers. So I think the insurer carries by far the greatest bulk of the blame, if we're going to put it in those terms.
Okay. Setting aside people who are just really difficult and are holding out for too much money and are being unreasonable with their claims, should anyone be unresolved 5 years after the February 22nd earthquake?
In my view, absolutely not. I think on a sort of a best practice approach, most of these claims could have been properly assessed on the first visit, really, with expert advice followed. Rebuilds take about 12 months. Conceptually, you would have all of these claims resolved and completed within 2 years, allowing a little bit of slippage even if it was 3 years. We're 5 years down the track. It's totally unacceptable.
What sort of toll is this taking on the people you're representing in this class action, for example, against Southern Response?
It's quite dramatic. We notice general anxiety, depression, medication. This has been increasing. I think it's coming to a little bit of a peak. We know of suicides that have taken place. It is really a very, very serious problem. And of course, people in that state of mind are not able to approach legal matters, and those of some complexity, very easily at all. So trying to get access to expert assistance is very difficult.
Okay, Andrew Little's been down there today. Who has he gone and seen?
I'm aware that he's been to see the Te Paa family. They've also spoken with 3 or 4 other families which we judge to be of interest to them.
Okay, and what sort of condition are those families in? What are they going through?
I think the very first meeting this morning, they met a very long, experienced and hardened police officer who ended up in tears. They then met people from the education sector, also on medication, diagnosed with severe depression. There are several other very nasty tales which they are only just coming to grips with, I think, from the opposition party point of view.
Do you think Christchurch has been forgotten about now? Because there is also a sense that the rebuild is happening and there's some wonderful new work going on in the CBD, and there are 2 quite different pictures, the one you're painting and the new face of the city. And do you think the people who are still waiting to be settled and to be resolved have been forgotten about?
They've been forgotten about perhaps by some of the general public. I certainly don't think that's the case in Christchurch, because many people who have been settled are actually very disgruntled about the terms of their settlement. They didn't have the money to go and get experts. They didn't have the money to go and get lawyers. They've had to accept the insurer's word to some degree as to whether or not the settlement was proper. So there's a high degree of ill feeling right across the board. And the position portrayed, I think, in the media nationally is quite misleading.
Grant, just before we go, have you have you heard from Southern Response today in response to the publicity surrounding the Te Paa family? So Andrew Little's been to visit them. We've been making lots of calls to Southern Response on their behalf. Have the Te Paas or you heard from Southern Response today?
The only communication that I'm aware of is, first of all, the formalities of getting a privacy waiver on behalf of the Te Paas so that Southern Response can lawfully respond. However, the family have already had a phone call suggesting that there will be builders on the site next week, and they can expect a very short build timeframe. Why that came about today, we can only speculate.
Hold on a sec. So after 5 years, 1 month short of 5 years, they received that phone call today?
That's right, and I think it's a result of an inquiry by your program.
Grant Cameron, who was taking a class action on behalf of some of Southern Response's claimants. We should say then that Grant has said that the work on the Te Paa's rebuild is, well, Southern Response have said it's happening.